I was 7 months pregnant, dragging bags of groceries up 3 full flights of stairs, while my husband James sat on the couch glued to his video game. By the time I set everything down, I was sweating and breathless, and instead of helping or even looking concerned, he glanced over and said, "You're honestly getting hard to look at. After the baby, you'd better lose that weight fast, or I'll find someone who actually cares about herself." His friends on the headset laughed. I didn't cry. I just smiled at him. 72 hours later, he was calling nonstop, but right now I'm in a hotel room trying to make sense of everything. My head feels like it's spinning. Maybe I'm in shock, maybe I'm numb, but I need to let it all out somewhere. For context, James and I have been together 5 years, married for 3. We met through a local theater group. He was playing a lead role and I was working on costumes. He was that charming musician type, all passion and charisma, and I fell harder than I should have. Things shifted the moment I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but after the initial fear, I became genuinely excited. James said he was happy too, but his behavior said something else. He started spending more time gaming with his friends and less time helping around the house. I kept telling myself he was adjusting in his own way, trying to be understanding, especially because this pregnancy has been brutal. 3 months of nonstop nausea, then anemia, and now constant back pain that feels like someone twisting a knife into my spine. Today was the breaking point. I had stopped by the store after work, car packed with groceries. Our building has no elevator, and my whole body already felt heavy and swollen. When I got inside, James was sprawled across the couch, headset on, empty energy drink cans everywhere. I asked if he could help me grab the rest from the car. Without looking away from his screen, he waved a hand and said he was in the middle of something important. So I did 6 trips up those stairs, my legs trembling, my back screaming, my ankles swelling inside my shoes. When I finally sat down, trying not to collapse, he looked directly at me and repeated the same disgusting line about how I looked. And then, like he wanted them to hear it, his friends laughed through the headset. I didn't scream. I didn't break. I walked up to him, kissed his forehead, and said I needed a shower. He looked confused, almost thrown off by how calm I was. The second the water hit me, I let myself cry. Not soft tears, angry ones, sudden clarity. All the red flags I've ignored for 5 years suddenly lined up perfectly. This wasn't new. It was just the rawest version of who he is, and I was about to raise a child with him. A child who would either learn to treat people this way or accept being treated this way. I couldn't allow that. I put on a loose maternity dress after the shower and told him I needed a little air. He barely nodded. I grabbed my hospital bag, my laptop, my important papers, and walked out without looking back. I'm now in a small hotel 20 minutes away. I called my sister Melissa, who lives about an hour from here, and she's coming tomorrow to help me figure out a plan. James has called twice and texted once asking where the leftovers were in the fridge. Not where I was. Not if the baby was okay. The leftovers. I know I have to leave him, but the thought terrifies me. 7 months pregnant, a shared lease, intertwined finances, even though my paychecks always went to my personal account. Thank God. I wanted a partner through this. Someone to lean on, someone to help me raise our child. Now all I can think about is that moment in the kitchen, how casually cruel he was, how he didn't hesitate to humiliate me for entertainment. I should have walked away years ago. I deserve kindness. My baby deserves a safe home. And I honestly don't know what the next step will look like, but I know one thing for sure: I'm not going back there tonight. Maybe not ever. It's been about 4 weeks since that night, and everything has gotten heavier and more complicated. After I left and checked into the hotel, James kept messaging like nothing real had happened, first confused, then annoyed, then trying to guilt trip me. I muted him and focused on resting because my baby kept kicking like she knew something big was happening. The next morning, Melissa arrived and we sat together talking through every possible option. She said I needed to go back temporarily just to gather my things quietly and prepare without him suspecting anything. So after a deep breath and a long cry, I agreed. When I walked back into the apartment, James acted like the entire situation was just some silly misunderstanding. He brushed off his cruel words, saying I was too sensitive, that he'd been joking, that he didn't mean it seriously. Then he twisted everything around and said my hormones made him feel like he was walking on eggshells. The worst part was when he said, "You have no idea how hard this pregnancy has been for me." I merely laughed at how absurd that was, but I kept my face straight and apologized for overreacting, just like Melissa advised. I told him I was tired and emotional. The relief on his face was sickening, like he believed he'd gotten me back under control, but I was already speaking to a lawyer. The past month has felt like living a double life. On the outside, I played the part of the calm, apologetic pregnant wife. On the inside, I was playing my escape step by step. I started keeping a detailed record of James's comments and behavior dates, exact words, everything. I even managed to record some moments on my phone when he was particularly cruel. My lawyer said it could help later. I set up a new bank account at a different bank and moved my paycheck there. I began slowly transferring small amounts of money from our joint account back to mine. Nothing huge, nothing noticeable, just reclaiming what I contributed. While reviewing our finances, I found something that made me feel physically sick. James had opened a credit card in my name without telling me, and he had over $5,000 in charges, mostly for gaming equipment and random junk. I reported the fraud immediately and followed all the steps the bank asked. I collected all our important documents, birth certificate, marriage license, tax returns, everything, and stored them somewhere safe. Melissa helped me find a small ground floor apartment with laundry inside and better security. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like freedom. I signed the lease without breathing a word to James. Every few days, when James was out with friends or absorbed in his game, I packed small things and took them to Melissa's place. Nothing he would notice missing. Things that mattered to me, things I couldn't risk leaving behind. I even bought a cheap burner phone and kept it hidden so he couldn't track anything I was planning. But pretending everything was normal was exhausting. Cooking his meals, smiling at his dumb jokes, listening to him complain about his bandmates for hours, watching him play games until late at night while I tried to ease the pain in my back. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled, because I knew exactly who he really was behind all the excuses. And just when I thought he couldn't sink lower, he did. One night, he brought his gaming friends over without warning. I was lying down because my back hurt so badly I could barely move. He came into the bedroom, leaned against the doorframe, and said I should be useful and order everyone pizza. When I said I was hurting, he rolled his eyes and told me pregnancy wasn't a disability and that his mom worked until the day before giving birth, something I later found out wasn't even true. His mom had been on bed rest the last month. The guys in the living room heard everything. One of them looked uncomfortable, but none of them said a word. I ordered the pizza anyway, with my own money. When it arrived, James yelled for me to get the door because his hands were busy. I walked past all of them in my pajamas, belly heavy, back throbbing, and after paying for the food, I even laid out the plates. They barely looked at me. Hours later, after they finally left, leaving trash everywhere, he came to bed and tried to initiate sex. I was exhausted and told him no, and he snapped. "You don't have to do anything, just lie there like you always do." I felt something inside me break. I went to the bathroom and cried quietly until I couldn't breathe, reminding myself this was temporary. I just had to get through a few more days. My plan was set. Next weekend, James was going to his parents' house for his dad's birthday. He'd be gone overnight. I would have exactly 24 hours. Melissa, Barbara, and surprisingly James's younger brother, Robert, offered to help. Robert had witnessed one of James' cruel outbursts weeks earlier and reached out privately to say he didn't agree with how James treated me. His support surprised me, but I was grateful. Everything was ready: documents, money, apartment, backup phone, bags hidden at Melissa's place. All I needed was that one window of time. I was terrified, but every kick from my daughter reminded me why I was doing this. I couldn't raise her around someone who believed humiliation was a joke. 4 days left. 4 days of pretending. 4 days until freedom. It's done. I'm finally out. I'm sitting on the floor of my new apartment right now, surrounded by boxes, my half-assembled crib leaning against the wall, and even though my whole body aches, I feel more peace than I have in years. When James left for his parents' house yesterday morning, he acted like everything was normal. He kissed my forehead, told me not to do anything crazy, and walked out the door with that careless confidence he always carries. The second his car disappeared, everything snapped into motion. Melissa pulled up with her SUV less than 10 minutes later, followed by Barbara driving a small moving truck she'd managed to borrow. And then Robert arrived looking nervous but firm and told me he was ready to help with whatever I needed. I had exactly 32 hours. The apartment looked so familiar, yet suddenly felt like a stranger's place four walls where I'd slowly lost myself. But there was no time to think about all that. We got straight to work. We followed the inventory list I'd created my clothes first, the ones James wouldn't immediately notice, then the baby items I bought myself, then my sentimental belongings. Robert handled the heavy lifting even though I kept telling him he didn't have to get involved. He just shook his head and said, "He's my brother, but this isn't right." Hearing that nearly broke me. No one in James's family had ever stood up for me before. And now here was Robert, sweating, hauling furniture, quietly doing the right thing. One of the most satisfying moments was disconnecting James's precious gaming PC, the one he bought, using the credit card he opened in my name. I packed it slowly into its original box while Robert watched, looking torn. I told him he didn't have to help with that part, but he picked it up and carried it out anyway. "If he didn't want consequences," he muttered, "he shouldn't have treated you like this." By evening, most of my belongings were out. We ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor of my new apartment. And for the first time in a long time, the laughter around me actually felt warm. They weren't laughing at me. They weren't mocking me. They were supporting me. This morning, we went back to the old apartment for the last sweep. I cleaned everything, not for James, but because I didn't want to leave anything behind that he could use as ammunition. I packed the last small items and laid out what needed to stay. On the kitchen counter, I left the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared, a folder containing the evidence of his financial fraud, the logs of his verbal abuse, photos proving what I did and didn't take, and a simple note that said, "Find someone better from the couch." I already have. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was just the truth. Moving while 8.5 months pregnant was brutal. My back throbbed, my ankles felt like they were made of concrete, and I had cramps from carrying even light things. But adrenaline and fear and hope carried me through every step. After everything was loaded, I took one last look around the apartment, realizing it wasn't a home anymore. It was a cage I stayed in because I convinced myself love required endurance. When I finally reached my new place, I sat on the floor and cried not from sadness, but from release. I called James's phone once, left a voicemail saying he would find what he needed at the apartment and that he shouldn't bother checking Melissa's house because I wasn't there. Then I sent a short text repeating the same thing, blocked his number, and emailed his parents so he couldn't twist the story. Less than an hour later, calls started coming in from random numbers. James was clearly using his friends' phones, trying to reach me. I ignored everyone. Eventually, Melissa's phone rang. It was James's mom, crying, apologizing for how her son treated me. She said she was ashamed and wished she had spoken up sooner. Hearing that was strangely comforting. Later, Robert messaged Melissa saying James had come home early, discovered everything, and completely lost it. Yelling, cursing, calling everyone he knew, trying to track me down. He kept switching between rage and insisting he wanted to fix things. Some of his friends reached out to me separately too, saying they were sorry and that they never liked how he treated me. A couple even admitted they stopped inviting us to events because they couldn't stand watching him disrespect me. I wish someone had told me earlier, but hearing it now still gave me validation I desperately needed. My new apartment is small, but sunlight fills the rooms. And there's a little balcony where I plan to drink coffee when the baby arrives. The hospital is 10 minutes away. I've changed my passwords, updated my emails, forwarded my mail, and even my workplace is supporting me through the transition. I'm scared, but I finally feel like I can breathe. James will fight the divorce my lawyer warned me. But I'm ready. I'm done letting him rewrite reality. I'm done shrinking myself to keep the peace. My daughter deserves better. And so do I. It's strange how quickly peace can turn into chaos again. Last night, after settling into the new apartment, I was finally starting to breathe normally. Melissa set up a small mattress for me because my bed won't be delivered until tomorrow, and I fell asleep faster than I expected. But around 11 p.m., Melissa shook me awake because someone was pounding on her front door. It was James. He'd ignored every message, every boundary, and driven straight to her place, even after I told him I wasn't there. Melissa immediately called the police non-emergency line while her neighbor quietly recorded everything from the hallway. James kept yelling my name, accusing Melissa of hiding me, demanding I come out and talk to him. He sounded unhinged, desperate, and angry all at once. After 10 minutes of banging, he finally left, but not before dropping a box of our wedding photos on our porch with a note saying, "I threw away everything we built." Melissa brought the box inside and just shook her head. Honestly, I don't know if he meant it as a threat, a guilt trip, or some twisted attempt at romance. But either way, it didn't work. This morning, before I even finished my tea, he emailed again. The tone was completely different, soft, apologetic, dramatic. He said he didn't realize how much he had hurt me, that he'd go to therapy, that he'd change, that he'd be the father our daughter deserved. But the whole thing was centered around him, how he feels, how he's hurting, how lonely he is. Not once did he mention the actual things he did to me. He didn't acknowledge the grocery incident, the insults, the financial fraud, the parties while I was in pain, or the way he ignored every doctor's appointment. The old me might have melted a little. The old me might have questioned everything. But the new me could see through every word. It wasn't love, it was control slipping through his fingers. My lawyer told me not to respond directly, so I didn't. I blocked that email address too and sent everything to her for the case file. Today, Melissa helped me start setting up the baby's corner in the new apartment. We opened the boxes with the tiny clothes I'd hidden away from James the past month. It felt surreal hanging them up, realizing that soon there will be a tiny person wearing them, a tiny person watching every choice I make. Every kick I feel reminds me why I left. Barbara dropped by in the afternoon with groceries, joking that I needed a Welcome to Freedom starter kit. She stayed for a while, helping me organize the kitchen. And even though the place is still mostly boxes and half-finished furniture, it already feels safer than anywhere I've lived with James. Later in the evening, Robert texted Melissa to update us. James apparently came home to the empty apartment again, noticed the divorce papers, and spiraled. He called almost every friend he has, telling them a dozen different stories, some saying I abandoned him for no reason, others saying I cheated, others claiming I stole his things. A few friends didn't believe him and reached out to Melissa instead. One said he remembered the night James mocked me in front of everyone and felt guilty for not saying anything. Another admitted he had stopped inviting us over because he couldn't stand how James spoke to me. Hearing that made my chest tight, not from pain, but relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the disrespect. Other people saw it too. I spent the rest of the evening sorting through the last boxes and filling out forms with my lawyer for the next steps. The apartment is quiet in a way that feels comforting. I lit a candle Melissa brought and sat on the tiny balcony looking out at the quiet street. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like someone could walk in and start an argument over nothing. I didn't have to brace myself for James's moods. I didn't have to pretend to be okay so he wouldn't get worse. I just sat there with my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter shift around softly, like she knew we had finally reached somewhere safe. I'm scared about the future because I know James isn't going to give up easily. He's the type who hates losing more than he loves winning. But I'm prepared now in ways I wasn't before. I have support. I have proof. I have a plan. And most importantly, I have a reason to keep moving forward even when it feels impossible. Every time I feel her kick, it's like she's telling me, "Keep going, Mom, and I will." It's been months now since the day I left, and sitting here tonight with my daughter asleep on my chest, I can finally say life feels like mine again. Lily is 6 months old now, all bright eyes and chubby cheeks, and she has this little squeal laugh that could fix any bad mood instantly. We found our rhythm, just the two of us. And even though I'm still tired most days, it's a peaceful kind of tired that comes from loving someone, not surviving someone. The birth came a bit earlier than expected, just a few days after I moved into the new apartment. Melissa was with me the whole time, holding my hand through every contraction, brushing my hair back, telling me I was stronger than I knew. After 19 hours of labor, Lily arrived at sunrise, screaming like she had a lot to say already. When they laid her on my chest, all the fear, the chaos, the nights I cried in bathrooms just washed out of me. I didn't tell James the first was in labor. My lawyer had advised that I didn't have to, and honestly, I couldn't imagine letting that level of stress anywhere near the delivery room. I notified him the next day with a short email and a simple photo of Lily wrapped in a blanket. His reaction was predictable anger, demands, accusations, threats, them pretending to be hurt. My lawyer responded on my behalf, and I stayed completely out of it. The divorce dragged on longer than I hoped because James fought everything he could. First, he demanded full custody even though he didn't show up to a single prenatal appointment. Then he claimed half my belongings even when most of them were things I owned before we met. But everything changed when my lawyer showed the evidence of his financial fraud and the recordings of the things he'd said to me. Suddenly, he wasn't so confident. Suddenly, he wanted to negotiate. In the end, I got primary custody. James gets supervised visits every other weekend for a few hours. But even then, he's shown up twice and canceled the rest with excuses that don't even make sense. The first time, he took photos of Lily and posted them online with captions about being a devoted dad. The second time, he left early because she cried when he held her. I document every missed visit like my lawyer told me to. Part of me is sad for Lily, but mostly I'm relieved. She doesn't deserve inconsistency, and I'll make sure she never feels the kind of emotional neglect I lived with. As for the money he tried to hide, my lawyer got me a good portion of it. And I'll admit I had one moment of pure pettiness that still makes me smile. When Lily was about 3 months old and I was finally feeling more like myself, I took a picture at the beach in a bikini, my first in years. My body is different now. Stretch marks, softer skin, a scar I earned the hard way. But I looked confident and happy in that photo, and for the first time in forever, I felt beautiful. I sent that picture to James with just one line. Already slimming down, don't worry. Then I blocked him again. It wasn't mature. It wasn't necessary. But God, it felt good after everything he put me through. These days, my life is simple but full. I have a decent routine, a supportive workplace, and a small savings account growing for Lily's future. Melissa visits almost every weekend, and Barbara has basically made my apartment her second home. Robert checks in now and then too, usually just to ask if we need anything. I appreciate him more than he knows because he have to support me against his own brother, but he did anyway. Lily adores him. She giggles every time he makes silly faces at her. A few weeks ago, James's mom reached out. She hasn't taken his side once, and she's been respectful about everything. She asked if she could visit Lily sometime, and I'm actually considering it. She is the only one from his family who didn't try to guilt me or manipulate the story. Lily deserves people who will love her genuinely, not conditionally. Sometimes when Lily's napping on my chest, I think back to the night I carried groceries up those stairs with James laughing in the background, calling me disgusting. Back then, it felt like the lowest moment of my life. But now, looking at how far I've come, I realize it was the moment that pushed me toward a life where I'm finally valued, even if the only person valuing me at first was me. And now, every time Lily smiles up at me with those wide, sparkling eyes, I know I made the right choice. I know I gave her a chance at a peaceful home. I know I saved both of us.